that it's important to make that cause of going to the head temple. By that time, of course, Nikko will have already been established at the head temple Taiseki, although it would have only just been at its very beginnings. So the importance of every so often going to study and learn new things about faith is what he is emphasizing there. So in this day and age, we can't all go to Taiseki. Even if we all had the money to go, they couldn't cope with you all. Nor could any one place now, with the membership being as it is across the world. So those days are gone. Even Mr. Toda in his time said, once is enough to go to the head temple. Once is enough, he said. And that will be what it will be, if not now, in the very near future, because of sheer numbers and administration. And that is why, of course, instead, Sensei has decided to establish great centers. And he also may, in the future, I'm sure, encourage the building of perhaps one or two great temples in certain continents. I don't know. That is beyond me to say. But certainly he encourages us to go, for example, to Tretz, which is more easy than going on Tozan, but nevertheless still requires effort, and in that sense is a great cause, and we can spend a week there or whatever it is learning more about faith. Or now we can come here. Thanks again to the foresight and vision of Sensei and the Soka Gakkai, who have helped us so totally in doing this. So we can now hold courses here, have meetings like this and so on. So that's really amazing. On you go.
Article 10. Unless you have a thorough understanding of and firm faith in the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, you should not study the Tientai's doctrines. Article 11. Followers of this school should engrave the teachings of the Gosho in their lives, and thereby inherit the ultimate principles expounded by the Master. Then, if they have any leisure time, they should inquire into the doctrine of the Tientai school. I
think this is very commonsensical. In other words, you need to master Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism first, because you discover that Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism embraces all 80,000 teachings. That's what the Gosho says. It's not an accurate number. It means all the teachings of Buddhism are embraced by the one teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and of course in this day and age by the one invocation to, or law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So it's important first to understand the Gosho. Then you can go to provisional teachings. Tientai's was a provisional teaching. The nearest of the provisional teachings, of course, to Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, because it placed the Lotus Sutra as number one amongst sutras. But still, it's no good trying to learn all about that if you don't understand Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, which is so fundamental and embraces everything else. So this is commonsensical, and if you wanted to start studying some other form of Buddhism, it would be as well to be careful about that one, because otherwise you might find yourself in a way slandering through lack of understanding of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. Is that clear? Okay? Right.
Article 12. You should be inclined to engage in discussion or deliver lectures on Buddhism, and you should refrain from pursuing secular concerns.
Well, I've already said enough about people of small desires, and really this all is part of that priests should be serving the Buddha. This is the role of a priest. A priest shouldn't be a priest unless he's prepared to do that. And this is not uncommon in religion, for there to be a place for people who want to dedicate their whole lives to serving God or whoever is the person founding that Buddhism, founding that religion. So it's understandable, I think, don't you? Do you? Right, on we go.
Article 13. Until Kosen Rufu is achieved, propagate the law to the full extent of your ability without begrudging your life.
Yes, please, is the answer to that one, isn't it? Very clear. But we should do it. Okay.
Article 14. As for practitioners who treasure the law more highly than their own lives, even if they are but humble teachers of the law, you must hold them in great esteem, revering them as you would the Buddha. Article 15. You should revere a teacher of the law who engages in its propagation as a sacred priest, even though he may be your junior. Article 16. Even though they may be lowly, you should deeply respect and regard as your teachers those whose understanding of Buddhism surpasses your own.
All these three articles following the same theme, and they deserve very careful thought, because it's very easy to be critical of someone who is exerting themselves in preparing a study lecture and giving it. And I think there is a great danger if you suddenly discover yourself sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, you know, this guy's a really awful lecturer, I don't think I'm coming again. Or, you know, I could do this better. Why isn't it me? Definitely, you know. That sort of way of looking at things grabs people sometimes. I know that because they write letters of complaint to me sometimes. But the truth is that anyone, you know, who is speaking about Buddhism and who has painstakingly prepared something, even though they may not be at all eloquent, can definitely teach every single person in that room or hall something that evening, if people keep their ears open. But if all the time they're thinking to themselves, well, this is a terrible lecture, of course their ears are closed anyway to what the person's saying, so they'll never get anything of value out of it. So I asked, you know, saying we should go to chapter study. Whether we feel there's a wonderful lecturer or not, we can learn something from it. That is absolutely definite. And if we fail to do so, we're the people who will suffer. I mean, us as individuals, because we won't develop our faith. And what's more, because we're slandering, we shall find that in some way or another we're making causes which we didn't make. So please bear that in mind. And it's no bad thing to pass it on to others. Okay.
Article 17. Do not follow even the high priest if he goes against the Buddha's law and propounds his own views.
Well, that's really very clear, isn't it? I don't think I need to say anything more about that.
Article 18.
Except perhaps to say, sorry. Except perhaps to say that, of course, Nikko's not been the only high priest who's gone off the rails. And because so many scholars in Japan have been sort of titillated, I think the word is, by all that's going on in Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, many have started to research and have written theses and papers and books on the subject. And extraordinary discoveries. You know, that there were one time young boys of 10 or on one occasion 10 years old was made the high priest, another 14 years old. This was to maintain the family power in the head temple. It's extraordinary. So I don't think, you know, what they taught could have been really all that valuable at 10. Likewise, of course, there was a high priest in Middle Ages time who sold the head temple. And it took 3 more high priests to get enough money to buy it back. But when you think about it, if you look at any religion in this world, over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, there's bound to be extraordinary happenings. I mean, you haven't got to look far for examples. In the Vatican, for example, or any other religion. Because, as I was saying earlier, they're so open to being distorted or twisted. This is where this Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin is so incredible. Because you have it all. It's all there. You can be, if you make the effort, a Buddha. You can tap your Buddhahood. You have the object of worship. You have the Gosho. Everything. That's where it's so incredible. No one stands between you and the object of worship, do they? It's all there for you. It's just incredible. Including the ultimate. Because Nichiren Daishonin said, even though you can't understand it yourself, when you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you're in Buddhahood. You can't chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo without being in Buddhahood. Sincerely, of course. So in every way, it's all there. And you have to protect it. That's the point. That's the point that was worrying Nikko, I'm sure, when 3 weeks before he died, he exerted himself to write all these things down. Okay?
Article 18. Even if a view is set forth unanimously by a conference of believers, the high priest should repudiate it if it goes against the Buddha's law.
Well, this is an interesting one, and we'll have to, although time is going a little over, we have to deal with it. So, Bill, on page 20, I will just read Sensei's comment on that article.
The basic point is that truth or falsity should be determined neither by authority, that's to say by the high priest, nor by the weight of the view of the multitude, that's to say by a conference of believers. In all matters, what counts most is whether or not something accords with the correct Buddhist teaching. And it goes without saying that the Daishonin's golden words are the standard that is to be used in making any such determination.
So what this is saying is that voting or a consensus by a majority is not necessary in the least democratic, because there may be a very important minority whose view is swamped by that. Equally, of course, voting is, though the only way a political democracy can function, voting is also not a perfect way of deciding anything, because of the state of life of the people who are voting. Some may be angry, some may be in rapture about the appearance of some politician on the telly. I don't know. I doubt it now, but all sorts of different things. Other people might have a toothache. Other people may have had an awful row with their wives when they were just leaving the house to go and vote. It's just, it's the best thing that can be found, but it's not perfect. But the whole point is Sensei is saying here, and what I'm saying is that in this case, you have the Gonzen, you have the Gosho, and you have Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So anything that is decided, if necessary, can be put to the judgment of the individual who is fully equipped to discover whether that is right by the Gonzen or not. Everything comes back to that. If you can't get agreement, then you have to go back. Everyone has to go off and chant for another month and then come back and talk again. And if each person is really putting the point to the Gonzen, and if what is being proposed is right by the Gonzen, then they will discover that. So you may say, I don't believe it. I can say to you, for 20 years, your central committee has run things like that. for 20 years in unity and a remarkable joy. 20 years. If we didn't get unanimous agreement, it was washed for that occasion, back, I was going to say to the drawing board, back to the Gohonzon, each one of us, until we could reach an understanding. So if what is being proposed is right by the Gohonzon, then that way everyone will come to realize it. If what is being proposed is wrong by the Gohonzon for some reason, then equally they will never reach agreement. And everyone will understand because they chant Daimokkon. Or there may be things that it's not right at this particular moment to do. I can think of things where we've waited 3 years even, or 4 years, for the time to be right to do them. That is why Sensei will say this is the perfect democracy. Because you have all the tools. And that's where, at every level, things should be run. So, of course, the important thing is speaking out, that people should be able to speak out their opinions, but it must always be based on Daimoku and the Gohonzon. And if it is, then everything will always be solved and agreement will be reached at the right time for everything to happen. Okay? Next.
Article 19. Black robes should not be worn by the priests. Article 20. Jikitotsu should not be worn by priests.
Well, jikitotsu are rather expensive, elaborate garments, I understand. Right, Akio? And it's quite unnecessary for them to wear such things. And equally, black robes worn by other sects. Okay, on we go. We have to be rather quick now.
Article 21.
Sorry. Dear.
You should not sit together with slanderers of the law at religious ceremonies for fear of suffering the same punishment as they.
Actually, the meaning of that is you have to be very careful if you mix with people from other sects or in terms of friendship. So, for example, when the trouble occurred amongst the priesthood 12 years ago, it was discovered that a number of priests had been stirred up against what was happening at the head temple by their classmates at school, who they were friends with. But of course those friends didn't really understand what was going on, and they played, on the emotions probably of those people, and they reached the wrong conclusions and caused great trouble as a result. So you have to make up your own mind based, of course you can listen to others, it's always useful to hear, but in the end every decision you make should go to the Gohonzon, shouldn't it? How absurd to waste it. Okay?
Article 22. You must not accept offerings from slanderers of the law.
That we've always avoided doing as best possible, because we've always said that before anyone can make offerings, they should either be Gohonzon members or nowadays fully fledged members of SGI UK. Right? And we don't accept offerings from non-members, by the way, because it can lead to trouble later if they change their minds. Right?
Article 23. Carrying a sword or staff in order to protect the Buddhist law is permissible. However, weapons should not be worn when presiding over religious services, though accompanying priests may be permitted to carry them to protect themselves and others.
Well, I hope we'll never come to that. Right?
Article 24. At religious ceremonies, young acolytes should not occupy seats lower than those of high-ranking lay followers.
What's the reason? The idea there is just because some rich man gives great offerings, no fuss should be made of them. Whatever, whether it's a small offering or a great offering, is of no account. What matters is that person's faith, and therefore they should never, people who are giving much money, should never take an honored place above even the youngest acolyte. which I think is a nice rule. Good.
Article 25. My disciples should conduct themselves as holy priests, patterning their behavior after that of the late master. However, even if a high priest or a priest striving for practice and understanding should temporarily deviate from the principle of sexual abstinence, he may still be allowed to remain in the priesthood as a common priest without rank.
Well, as you can gather, in those days, all Buddhist priests were celibate. They remained celibate in Japan until the Meiji Emperor came to power, having ousted the shoguns, the samurai, and for reasons that I've never got an answer to, the emperor decided to tell all the Buddhist priests, all priests I think, that they should marry. So they all rushed off like mad to find wives and have children. Reasons unknown. I can't imagine why, but presumably it was some sort of equivalent of a coronation present to everybody. Something like that. Anyway, of course, there are great arguments against celibacy, but there are also great arguments for celibacy. Because if a priest is allowed to marry and have children, he is just the same as you or I in every respect, except that he wears different clothes. He is no different to a lay person and has all the worries and problems and mundane troubles of the lay person. Whereas there is the other image of the priest who is, as I've said earlier, serving the Buddha 24 hours a day. So there are lots of arguments this way and that way. I have no idea what the future will be. I think it's entirely up to the priests to decide what's best. But I hope that they bring in the lay people, or at least representatives of the lay people, to discuss these matters with, because obviously there can be strong feelings either way. And last one.
Article 26. You should treasure those practitioners who are skilled in difficult debate, just as the late master did.
So that's straightforward. People who can debate well and uphold the teachings is very important. So there it is. I could go on talking, but it's past time. And the most important thing is, as we said at the beginning, that we make this the basis for our faith, these 26 warnings. However, clearly understanding that there are certain things that are quite specifically for the priesthood, and in that sense, using good sense. But they've got to be the pillars of our faith in the future, and I hope you agree, having heard them, that you yourself will be prepared to guard them and protect them and pass them on to all future generations. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Sorry.